My goodness, this is such a haunting film you've created. The Pearl Comb is it's a short film, but it's hard to believe because you pack so much into it. Where did this
Yeah.
concept come from?
Well, it's a mixture of different things, but to cut a long story short, in Britain, there's a true story of the Edinburgh Seven, which were the first seven women to be qualified doctors in the UK, and they got their degrees from the University of Edinburgh. And when they came out, the locals threw mud at them, and the medical community tried to stop them from practicing medicine. So that was the first true story that I heard. And then around about the same time, I was on holiday in Cornwall, and I heard of various legends about mermaids. And then I don't know what goes on in my mind, but somehow combined the two, came up with a new story, and then out came the Pearl Comb. But the challenge is that you could maybe make this into a feature. There's enough content for a feature, but of course I wanted to make it into a short. And after a lot of work, I got it down to 20 minutes.
I was gonna say it packs the 20 minutes are full. I can't believe this is
Yeah.
you were able to chop it down so much. And the cinematography to that is just absolutely beautiful. But before we get into that, how hands-on were you when it came to the casting of this?
Well, the guy who played the old farmer, Simon Armstrong, he was the lead in my previous short film, and he is actually him and Willem Dafoe, the movie star. They're my two favorite actors. And Simon, I auditioned for my last short film where he played a mysterious farmer, and so obviously I thought he would be perfect in this one, although he just had to switch accents. And then BT Edney, who's a very famous TV actress here in the UK, she used to be in a TV series called Poldark. And Amy, who works with me, she's like my assistant. Her mum is a huge fan of hers, and so we really wanted her, and we'd seen her. And then the hard bit was trying to find the person to play the mermaid, and that was an open casting, and we had a great casting director. But my goodness, finding a mermaid is you it's not an easy task, particularly because she's a villainous mermaid. Normally mermaids are very, you might say, sort of classically alluring,
Yeah.
whereas she had to be alluring and sinister, which is just not an easy thing to pull off. But Clara, who ended up playing the role, she was incredible. So we were very lucky to get her.
Did you craft the rhyme that she had to recite, or was that part of the lore too?
Well, there's mixtures of all sorts. Parts are from poems or legends that I'd read. And then when I read those, I would take the archaic language, but then I had to. So I'd take a certain phrase or way of saying something that they would use in Victorian England, or possibly a little bit before, and then I would have to just take those words but recontextualize them into the story that I'd come up with. So it just took a long time, cut a long story short. And then I had to go to a guy who's like an expert in languages and say, does this actually sound right? Because there's that danger of when you do something like that, that you might not really be saying what you're supposed to be saying. But that's how I did it.
For the rhyming scheme where she's saying, like the curse, I don't know, that was just
Oh, with the curse.
that's what I was talking about. Yeah.
Oh, right. The actual curse I did invent with a friend of mine called Paul Wilson. Paul is also a magician and a film director. He's made a dark thriller before, and we were trying to convey a lot of information very quickly. And at first, she was just explaining the curse to him, But then we just thought if we come up with a rhyming curse, we will say everything and it won't sound like exposition. And so that's how we came up with it.
And it
Yeah.
helped with the short film premise too, because get it all sort of in that little rhyme.
Yeah. I mean, as anyone will tell you, I think that the great craft of a short film is it makes you better at getting elegant at telling your exposition. So in a obviously like a folk horror like this, the idea of someone giving a curse in a rhyme, it works brilliantly, and it doesn't sound clunky. So it was just one of those things. But it took us ages to just have the idea to put it in a rhyme. Yeah.
Talk about the CGI work that went into crafting the mermaid tail and certainly adding the teeth and the beautiful blue eyes that haunt you.
Yeah, well, Clara, I mean, she's a very striking woman as it is with beautiful eyes. So we just wanted to enhance them. So we filmed the tide down in Cornwall. We would film the tide coming in and coming out, and then we made that into tiny little patterns, and then we put that inside the blue of her eyes. So that's how we did that effect. And then the teeth, where she has sort of vampiric teeth, they're actually a live in-shot a special effect. So there is a company in Britain who does specialist vampire teeth. So she, if you ever want vampire teeth, but they literally took a mold, like when you go to the dentist, and they took a proper mold and then they came up with the teeth. And it turns out that there are certain things VFX is good at and not good at, and there are certain things that special effects are just much better at. And it turns out when it comes to teeth, you're much better using special effects. But then, as for the mermaid's tail, well, that was hard work. We used a brilliant company called Koala, and a lot of work with, firstly, artists to invent the tail. And each one of those scales were actually hand painted,
Wow.
and then from there, their team of animators would animate it. And boy, did they do a great job. I mean,
Goodness.
if I paid them what they're really worth, I think they've probably Star Wars level, but they
Right?
just they just got
Peter
really
Jackson budget.
they just got really
Or
excited, and
Lucas.
they really wanted to help.
Is there a scene then that came from page to screen that you're just the most proud of how it turned out?
Oh, now that is a good question. My my favorite scene. I don't always like, the big dramatic scenes, because sometimes a challenge is how do you make the simpler scenes sort of interesting? Ones where you do have to convey certain bits of information. And there is a scene near the start where Betty, the fisherman's wife, she discovers her husband asleep in his little hut, his little man cave, and there's bottles of wine everywhere. And without saying it, she implies you were up all night drinking, and I was worried about you. And I think that's actually my favorite scene. I think the acting between the two of them is incredible, and it's funny, and also I think just that classic thing of, the wife or girlfriend just being upset, like you never came home, where were you, what were you doing? And then it's juxtaposed with this guy who's just been terrified because he's actually met a supernatural creature. So it was just a good clash of context. And I think that was my favorite scene.
All of it is just exceptional, and you must be proud of how it's come to screen. Have you gotten such a outstanding reception from the horror community or people who are fans? I mean, I'm not a horror fan, and I would watch this as a feature film. I literally am not, but yeah,
Well,
I would watch this, and it gives me, like Van Helsing vibes.
oh, wow. When you make something, it's scary because you have all the best will in the world, but you have no idea if it's going to be terrible or great. You don't really know. And all you have to do is have faith that it's going to work, really. And then you work your best and you just hope that it kind of turns out. And in this case, it did turn out well. I mean, we're still right at the start of the run. But when it played, we did a Carson Crew screening, which I was really nervous about. And my heart was really beating fast. But when everyone was sort of laughing at the right bits and then jumping at the right bits, that's when you know, oh, we did it. We actually did it. And I think what's scary about making any kind of film is, so I come from a live performing background. So I performed magic shows for many years and also stand-up comedy. The beauty of being a live performer is if it's not going well, you can adjust it in the moment. And what's terrifying about being a filmmaker is once you've made it, that's it. There's nothing you can do, you know. So that's the really nerve-wracking side of it.
Well, have you considered making it into a full-length feature film at this point?
I'm not sure. I am trying to make a feature film at the moment, and it's also it has folk horror elements, which I've. And one of the reasons I made this short was to show people what I can do at a high budget level with feature length budgets. But I don't know if The Pearl Comb could be a feature. I don't know. I tend to think a story is what it is. You know, and sometimes I write something and it might be 100 pages. Sometimes I write something and it might be only 10 pages. So I try to just go with it, and it is what it is. And I think The Pearl Comb is a short. That's what I think.
Well, what's next for you? Have you been working in any other projects?
Yeah, so in my mind, I've come up with another three short films. Which I'd like to try and get one of them made. One of them is an AI teen romance, which is a bit different. One is a very dark drama about trafficking, and the final one is another folk horror. And then I'm also working on a folk horror feature film. So. You know,
Up to that much. You don't get that. Hmm.
well, you know, it's you just have to keep going at it, and then once in a while, one of them works and it goes. But it's a lot of plate spinning. You need to have quite a few going because you're not quite sure when you might get the funding for one, or one of the ideas might turn out. But you know, everyone talks about this with writing, that you just have to keep going, and that's really what I'm doing. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you have multiple irons in the fire going at once. My goodness. And it's just incredible the work you do on our screens. What would you like to say to people who are just fascinated and a fan of the incredible work you do, whether you're acting or whether you're directing or writing at this point?
Well, I just, you know, it's always just a huge thank you to the people who follow my stuff. I feel as though I'm interested in mysteries, and I'm also just interested in humans and our joint psychology. And I think that's those are the things I like to tap into, really. And and I just hope that people enjoy the things that I come up with.
It sounds like you have a bright future ahead of you. Are you going to be on screen anytime in the near future, though?
Well, I'm always auditioning.
And putting yourself in the wonderful work you do as well.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I do my own work, but then, like most, you know, actors, we're always doing self tapes and auditions all the time. So, you know, I do I mean, the randomness of self tapes is that in itself is hilarious. You know, I think in the last month I've been an American president, a butler, a servant, a lawyer, numerous detectives. You're always a detective, and And what happens with self tapes? You just do them, and then once in a while they're like, "Yep, that's our guy."